Chapter 111. In the Windy Nation, only the leader of the North Snow Martial Academy, Wuxia, had comprehended the blade intent. As for whether there were other hidden figures, no one knew. Just like the blade intent, the sword intent was also very hard to comprehend. At least until now, no one in the Windy Nation had ever comprehended the sword intent. Among the younger generation, there were only a few people who had a chance. The head disciple of the Sky Cloud Martial School, Hidden Fragrance Sword, Zhu Mei, was one of them. However, no one had expected that in an inner disciple ranking competition, there would be a nobody who had comprehended the sword intent that all the sword artists dreamed of. How shocking was that? No, he hasn't comprehended the real sword intent yet. It can only be counted as half-step sword intent. On the VIP seats, a cyan-clothed man said slowly. Next to him, a beautiful young lady in a pink dress looked confused. Half-step sword intent? The cyan-clothed man explained. I have seen a sword artist who had comprehended the sword intent in the Rudra Nation. That kind of power that could cut through the void was still fresh in my memory. After I came back, I made up my mind that I must comprehend my own sword intent. However, in the past few years, I have only comprehended a little bit of it, but my cultivation has been improving at an amazing speed. The beautiful young lady suddenly understood. No wonder her husband's cultivation was getting more and more profound. It was because he was stimulated by something. However, her husband couldn't comprehend the sword intent no matter how hard he tried. But a 15 or 16-year-old boy had done it. She had to admit that sometimes a few days of effort from a genius was equivalent to a few years of effort from others. The beautiful young lady was the owner of the Flower Fairy restaurant in the ancient spring town, Flower Fairy. Next to her was her husband, the blue cloud sword artist, Shun Lang. Rumble. While the two were talking, a storm was already brewing on the platform. The half-step sword intent was about 3 to 4 meters long. It sliced through the black chi flow and the horrifying black sword light like cutting a piece of tofu. Then the sword chi, which was only 2/3 smaller, still had some power left on the ground and flashed past Li Kuang's side. In the next second, the rock wall in front of the VIP seats had become soft, and stone powder was falling down. Li Kuang stood on the spot in a daze. Just now he felt the presence of death. If it wasn't for the opponent being merciful and deliberately deviating from the attack's trajectory, that sword chi would have definitely cut him in half and turned him into a blood mist with no bones left. Puff! Suddenly Li Kuang spat out a mouthful of blood. Although the sword chi hadn't hurt him, the half-step sword intent contained within it had made his blood boil. He couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood, but he felt much better. Yi-chun is victorious. The administrator who drew lots recovered from his shock and announced loudly. Sheathing the hidden cloud sword, Yi-chun turned around and walked away. In the elder seating area, the head elder let out a long breath and said, although it's only a half-step sword intent, and it's still uncertain whether he can comprehend the real sword intent or not, the success rate is still 10 times or even 100 times higher than the others. He has already comprehended the half-step sword intent at such a young age. His potential is limitless. In the future, he will definitely become one of the 4 pillars of our Sky Cloud Martial School. However, we still need to observe him carefully and test his loyalty. Of course. On the other hand, Yi Tianhao and Shin Yuqing were overjoyed. The Duanmu family had a young master Duanmu, and their Yi family had a genius who had comprehended the half-step sword intent. In the future, they would definitely be able to catch up with the Duanmu family, or even surpass the Duanmu family and become the leader of the top 8 families. The others also sighed in their hearts. After today's fight, Yi-chan had become quite famous. Within a couple of days, his name would spread across the entire Windy Nation. Some people were happy, but some people were hiding their evil intentions. A middle-aged man with a scar on his face, who was wearing a navy blue robe, looked down with a hint of killing intent flashing through his eyes. He thought to himself, this kid can't be allowed to live. Otherwise, when he grows up, the Sky Cloud Martial School will surpass the Purple Sun Martial School, and even the North Snow Martial Academy and the Emerald Martial Palace. He is a dangerous person. If anyone knew what the middle-aged man was thinking, they would be very surprised, because this man was not a member of the martial school. Instead, he was a solitary martial artist, named Zhu Liang. He had been famous for decades, and was now at the peak of the early clasping Yuan realm. However, if the leader of the Purple Sun Martial School knew about this, he would not be surprised. Zhu Liang had been the intelligence elder of the Purple Sun Martial School since a long time ago, and was responsible for collecting all kinds of information in the martial world. At the same time, when the Purple Sun Martial School was inconvenient to deal with, he would take care of it. In the past, Zhu Liang had killed a lot of talented martial artists, and had killed those who could pose a threat to the Purple Sun Martial School. "Yichan, you are so dead." Zhu Liang sneered in his heart, but didn't show it on his face. The fight continued, but in the eyes of the audience, the exciting fight had become boring. Not far away, Song Fei glanced at Yichan and said to Yiqing, "It seems that in this year's Wind Cloud Martial School, only he can compete with Meng Chong." Yiqing said, "The sword chi combined with the half-step sword intent is indeed very powerful, but it is still hard to say if he wants to win against Meng Chong. Of course, both of them are already at the top of the core disciples. The top 10 inner disciples competition is not that important to them. Plus, the Sky Cloud Martial School is just the Sky Cloud Martial School. There are still the other top 4 martial institutions, and outside of the Windy Nation, there are many more powerful martial institutions. Therefore, you have to look at the bigger picture. Being powerful for a short period of time does not mean anything." Song Fei sighed. "Yeah. The top young martial artist of our Windy Nation, the young Master Emerald, is only rank 68th in the Hidden Dragon rank. Who knows how many geniuses will appear in the next Hidden Dragon rank?" The 8th round of the competition soon finished. There were 3 people who had a perfect winning record. They were the Blood Shadow Blade Meng Chong, Tai Feng and Yichan. There were 5 people who had a perfect winning record. The 9th round, the 9th battle. The Blood Shadow Blade Meng Chong against the crazy man Xiao Yi. Xiao Yi grinned and said, "Meng Chong, this time you are going to lose your first place. It is only the half-step sword intent. The true spirit continent is not dominated by warriors who have mastered the sword intent and blade intent. I, Meng Chong, do not need to master the blade intent to win against anyone." Meng Chong did not care if Yichan had mastered the half-step sword intent or not. For him, all he wanted to do was to win against his opponents again and again, to push his blade to its limit. After he finished talking, Meng Chong's aura became even more intense. What a good Meng Chong. He did not fall for my provocation at all. Xiao Yi was planning to use Yichan to attack Meng Chong and distract him, but it did not work at all. Instead, it increased Meng Chong's aura. However, Meng Chong was right. Learning the sword intent was indeed a way to become powerful. However, there were so many ways to become powerful, and the sword art was only one of them. Plus, Yichen's foundation was still not that deep, and his cultivation was also one level lower than theirs, so there was no need for him to be afraid. "If that is the case, let's fight," Xiao Yi yelled. He threw out a punch with a thunder-like chi. "Break for me." Meng Chong started running. The long blade in his hand had already been out of its scabbard. The blood-red blade light sliced towards Xiao Yi along with the chi. Dang! Xiao Yi was indeed worthy of being ranked 3rd in the last Hidden Dragon competition. His power was not weaker than Yiqing's, and he was even better at fighting head-on. With only one punch, he had shattered the weakened blade light. The second blade. The blood-red blade light shot up into the sky. It even changed the color of the air. Xiao Yi did not back out. Instead, he drew a half-circle with both of his hands. A millstone-sized ball of chi gathered in front of his chest and clashed with the blade light. Boom! The power spread out in all directions. Xiao Yi backed out 3 steps. A little bit of blood leaked out from the corner of his mouth. Off the stage, Yichan thought to himself, Xiao Yi is even more powerful than the ghost sword Li Kuang, but he could only barely block Meng Chong's second blade attack. It would be really hard to win against him. Chapter 112. The third blade. Meng Chong's long blade flashed in the air. Suddenly, a bright blood-red blade light appeared, bringing with it an unstoppable sharpness as it slashed towards Xiao Yi. So fast! Xiao Yi could only see a blood-red flash in front of him. The blade light was already 1 meter away from him. At this moment, it was already too late to dodge. Furthermore, that was not his style. If he were to take it head-on, he would definitely vomit blood and retreat. Meng Chong's third blade was not that easy to block. Even the Iron Fan Yiqing could only protect himself from being injured. Roar! Xiao Yi bent his body, a green halo spread out. A huge Zhanqi arm extended out from his shoulder. A fist clashed with the blade light. The qi energy formed a circle, and suddenly expanded. Crack, 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 crack. The stone pillars that were far away from each other started to crack. It looked like they would shatter if the wind blew. Meng Chong stopped his attack. He did not attack again. The crowd started to discuss. Brother Xiaoyi actually has a Zhanqi arm on his shoulder. This is unbelievable. The Zhanqi arm does not look like a human's, it looks more like a beast's forelimb. You can even vaguely see the scales made of Zhanqi. And the palm is like a beast's claw, and it is so powerful it blocked Brother Meng Chong's third blade attack with only one punch and it was not damaged at all. Looks like when Brother Xiaoyi was fighting with Li Yun, he did not use his full power. He must have saved it for Brother Meng Chong. Li Yun's eyes shone, but he did not say anything. Pop! Something even more shocking happened. A Zhanqi arm extended out from Xiaoye's left shoulder, but it was green in color, and there were traces of green qi rising from it. It looked like a burning flame. Meng Chong, I have never shown this ancient demon secret art to anyone before. Today you will be the first person to see it. Wiping the blood from his mouth, Xiaoyi looked excited. The ancient demon secret art was something he found in a ruin by chance. It was divided into 3 parts, the first part, the second part, and the last part. He only had the first part. It was not complete, but it was not weak at all. It was comparable to a low-rank Earth Realm martial skill. Ancient demon secret art. Yichun had never heard of such a martial technique before. Seems like this Xiaoyi had a fortuitous encounter. Meng Chong glanced at the Zhanqi arm and said nonchalantly, I don't care what kind of ancient demon secret technique you have learned. In my eyes there are only those who have fallen. Then go ahead and try. Xiaoyi was already 2 meters tall. With the addition of 2 gigantic Zhanqi arms on his shoulders, he looked like a giant. An endless pressure spread out from his body. The wind in the plaza seemed to have stopped. What answered him was a series of blood-red saber lights. The saber lights were like crescent moons, and they formed a blood-red wheel that was more than 10 meters tall. The rotating blade aura wheel sliced the air into pieces, rolling towards Xiaoyi. Xiaoyi laughed. He did not retreat. He raised his 2 gigantic Zhanqi arms and welcomed the attack. Bang, 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 bang. The 2 true energy arms raised their fists and punched the blood-red Dharma wheel again and again. Instantly, red and green energy splattered in all directions, creating a very beautiful scene. Break! Meng Chong's body appeared in the blood-red Dharma wheel. His right arm suddenly emitted a ball of blood-red light. The light went into his saber and he waved it. Swoosh! The green Zhanqi arm on Xiaoye's right shoulder was cut off. It flew more than 10 meters away. It turned into pure yuan qi and merged with the air. One of senior brother Xiaoye's Zhanqi arm was cut off. Someone shouted. The others did not have time to talk. They were afraid that they would miss something interesting. Xiaoye's face turned pale. The Zhanqi arm was formed by his Zhanqi. It consumed a lot of Zhanqi. Now that one of it was cut off, the total amount of Zhanqi was reduced by a third. His blood was boiling. I'll cut off your other arm. Meng Chong did not stop. He flipped his saber and slashed towards the green Zhanqi arm on Xiaoye's left shoulder. Clang! It was as if the saber had slashed onto a well-tempered steel. It created a lot of colorful sparks. If one looked closely, they would realize that the saber had only cut through half of it. It could not cut through. Xiaoyi forcefully suppressed his boiling qi and blood and Zhanqi. Both of his arms gathered in the air and pushed out a ball of Zhanqi bullet that was glowing with a green light. Meng Chong's saber was stuck on the green Zhanqi arm. He could not pull it out. Seeing the Zhanqi bullet flying towards his chest, he knew that he could not hold back anymore. He opened his mouth and let out a thunderous shout. Meng Chong clenched his left hand into a fist. Blood-red lightning shot out from between his fingers, crackling loudly. Swoosh! The Zhanqi bullet was like a punctured balloon. It disappeared into thin air. Yichun shook his head. Even this could not do anything to Meng Chong. Xiaoyi was definitely going to lose. But to be able to force Meng Chong to this extent, it was already very commendable. Break! The saber continued to attack. It finally cut off the green Zhanqi arm. But this green Zhanqi arm was very strange. When it was cut off, it immediately exploded into countless of green flames. It grew bigger as it touched the wind. It burned everything. Swoosh, swoosh. Meng Chong saw that the situation was not good. His body flew backwards. The platform he was standing on was instantly burned into a glass-like shape. There was blood coming out of his mouth and nose. But Xiao Yi was not too upset, he said. I lost. The two Zhenqi arms had consumed 2/3 of his Zhenqi, plus the Zhenqi bullet from before. There was not much Zhenqi left in his body. He could not fight against Meng Chong anymore. Letting out a breath, Meng Chong said, to be able to force me to this extent, you are the first one. Same to you. You still have a battle with Yi Chan. His half-step sword intent is not that simple either. Let's see how you are going to beat him. After saying that, Xiao Yi jumped off the platform. When this battle was over, the other two platforms had also finished their battles. The remaining two battles were not worth watching. They were all inner disciples with very few points. They would definitely be eliminated, including Zhang Haoren. It was not easy for him to make it this far. Finally, the last round of battles began. When it was the 7th battle, the heavyweight battle started again. This battle was between Yi Chan and Tai Feng. One of them was a genius sword artist who had comprehended the half-step sword intent, while the other one was the representative of a late bloomer. Up until now, both of them had maintained a perfect winning record. No matter which side won, there would be one less person with perfect winning record, and that person would definitely compete with the Blood Shadow Blade, Meng Chong, for the title of the first inner disciple. Many people were thinking about this in their minds. Who was more powerful between Yi Chan and Tai Feng? Judging from the previous battles, it was really hard to tell. Yi Chen's sword chi was indeed powerful, but Tai Feng's leg art was also not to be underestimated. Pei Shaoqing, who was as powerful as the ghost sword Li Kuang, was an example. Plus, no one knew if he had any more powerful skills. Tai Feng smiled and said to Yi Chan, "Thank you for your guidance." Okay. Yi Chen nodded. To be honest, he was a bit scared of Tai Feng, since he did not have many chances to show his power, so he had to do it himself. Chapter 113. On the stage, the two stood 50 steps away from each other. Perhaps it was because Tai Feng felt that Yi Chan was not easy to deal with. This time he did not take a passive approach. For the first time he took the initiative. He slightly lifted his right leg, and a vast force suddenly integrated into his body. Suddenly, the airflow above the square became abnormal, and a fierce wind swept across. On the opposite side, Yi Chan was dressed in a white robe. The hem of his robe was fluttering in the wind like a small boat in a stormy sea. However, when he pulled out the hidden cloud sword halfway, the wind on the square seemed to have been cut into two halves. One half of Tai Feng's side was raging, while the other half of Yi Chen's side was calm. Compared to the huge square, the two of them were so small, like they were floating in the air. However, at this moment, the vast square seemed to be unable to contain the two of them, as if it could collapse at any time. Brother Tai Feng is going to use that kick again. I wonder how Brother Yi Chen is going to block it? Brother Yi Chen's sword chi is invincible. I'm afraid he can cut through Brother Tai Feng's attack with just one sword. I bet that Brother Tai Feng will win 1,000 gold. Do you dare? Why not? I bet that Brother Yi Chan will win 2,000 gold. Me too. Me too. In the spectator seats, some of the outer sect disciples who had different opinions started to gamble with huge sums of money. For them, they could show off their foresight and earn money at the same time, so why not? As for losing, they didn't even think about it. Seeing this scene on the stage, Pei Shaoqing said lightly, "This kick is very powerful. Fighting with it is like fighting against the whole world. It is boundless and endless." So powerful? Qiu Ruotong, who seemed to be very close to Pei Shaoqing, asked in surprise. If it was not so, I would not have lost so easily. There was no way for me to resist at all. Only Meng Chong can break this force. Qiu Ruotong thought that Yi Chan could also do it, but she did not say it out loud. After all, she would find out soon. One kick to move the wind and clouds. A thunderous roar was heard. Tai Feng slightly leaned his upper body back and threw out a kick. He had turned the power of the world into his own and attacked Yi Chen's half of the body. Pop! The calm aura that Yi Chan had created earlier had been broken, and a ferocious airflow swept over with an even more terrifying aura, causing many inner sanctum disciples to lose their footing, and their hearts were filled with shock. Break! Whoosh! In the void, the pure and bright sword chi flashed and disappeared. The momentum was like a deflated balloon, collapsing on itself. Senior brother Tai Feng's momentum has been broken. Senior brother Yi Chan is indeed powerful. The eyes of the inner disciples who supported Yi Chan lit up, It seems like the half-step sword intent is more powerful. Senior brother Yichun is really a godly person. One sword and one person, he can even cut through the great momentum. On the VIP seats, the green sky swordsman, Shun Lang, said solemnly, "This kid actually possesses the ability to sever the power of nothingness. I'm afraid he's not far from comprehending the true sword intent." Tai Feng's naive expression disappeared as he stared at Yichun with a serious expression. Yichun was the first person who had given him endless pressure ever since he had comprehended the general trend. In front of Yichun, the so-called general trend could not even withstand a single blow. It seemed like he could only attack with brute force. Changing wind and cloud. Tai Feng's entire body rose up from the ground. All of the general trend had been infused into his leg power, attacking towards Yichun one after another. His body was light and agile, and his leg power was as heavy as a mountain. The airflow around Yichun's body surged, and when those countless leg powers landed on him, it seemed like the mountains were collapsing and the earth was cracking. Yichun was in the middle of it all, but his expression was calm. Without any hesitation, he waved his hidden cloud sword continuously, and within a blink of an eye, he had thrown out dozens of sword attacks. Each sword attack would shoot out a 3-meter-long thick sword chi. The sword chi was so sharp that it seemed like it was going to tear the space in front of it apart. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Beams of sword chi shot up into the sky, cleanly cutting through the leg power. It was so sharp that no one could stop it. Tai Feng's facial expression suddenly changed. Zhan Qi surged out of his body, and his leg power became even stronger. Wave after wave of Zhan Qi collided with the platform surface, causing the platform to crack and collapse, and the stone pillars to collapse. Many people had started to support Yichun on the way, because Yichun's sword attack had been so brilliant, and it had easily broken Tai Feng's momentum. Now, seeing Tai Feng's power, they couldn't help but worry about Yichun. No matter how powerful the sword chi was, it was still limited, and how could it fight against the endless momentum? Break. At this critical moment, Yichun didn't hold back anymore. The hidden cloud sword seemed to be moving slowly, but it was actually moving very fast. The moment the tip of the sword reached its peak, the half-step sword intent burst out. Clang, 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 caught off guard. The great swords around the inner disciples' waists all flew out of their scabbards and merged with Yichun's sword aura. With a sharp aura that was enough to cut through a mountain, the swords rushed towards Tai Feng, who was in the air. Clang! A mountain cracking sound arose. Tai Feng's leg power was broken, and he was sent flying backwards while vomiting blood. What a terrifying sword power! It even took away our swords. In the future, if any sword artist encounters Brother Yichun, he or she will be at a disadvantage. The half-step sword intent is too powerful, and the swords won't be under his control. Jishuan came out of the Emerald Martial Palace not long ago, and our Sky Cloud Martial School also has Brother Yichun. But unfortunately, none of them can be compared with young Master Emerald. Standing on the ruined platform, Yichun waved the hidden cloud sword in his hand. Dozens of swords seemed to be attracted by an invisible force, and they all fell down, neatly inserted into the ground in front of the inner disciples, forming a row. This is mine. And mine. All the inner disciples who used swords walked up and pulled out their own swords. Tai Feng landed on the ground and said in admiration, "That last sword attack was brilliant. I didn't expect the half-step sword intent to be so powerful." Yichun smiled lightly. "Your leg power is also very powerful. If it was a little bit more powerful, even I wouldn't be able to defeat you." The general trend of Taishu is very mysterious, and I only learned it by chance. I won't be able to make a breakthrough in 1 or 2 years, so I can only try to improve my skills. But you have to be careful of Meng Chong. His blade power is too powerful. Even the half-step sword intent seems to be unable to defeat him. Indeed. Yichun nodded. In front of absolute power, fancy skills were useless. His current half-step sword intent was a bit flashy, and could not be compared to the real sword intent. After Tai Feng's defeat, only Blood Shadow Blade Meng Chong and Yichun were left. In the crowd's eyes, the other disciples had no chance to compete for the first place, and the winner could only be one of them. After the 9th round, there were only 6 rounds left in the 10th round. The next 6 rounds were extremely intense. Some of the inner disciples who had a chance to compete for the top 10 were not afraid of the top 10 inner disciples. So they all used their most powerful skills to fight against the top 10 inner disciples. Unfortunately, the gap between their fighting power was too huge. Even if they tried their best, it would be useless. The 10th round had ended. Meng Chong and Yi Chan were tied for the first place with 20 points. Li Yunping had won one round, so he had 19 points, ranked third. Yi Qing and Tai Feng had lost one round each, so they had 18 points, ranked fourth. Xiao Yi had lost one round and drawn one round, so he had 17 points, ranked sixth. Zhou Ru, Pei Xiaoqing, Ghost Sword Li Kuang, and Qiu Ruotong were ranked sixth. There were 3 people who had been eliminated from the ranking: Feng Ping, Dong Haohua, and Song Fei. None of them had more than 15 points. Chapter 114. No matter what, the new top 10 inner disciples had been born, and the previous one had become a thing of the past. This year, the most eye-catching disciples were without a doubt Li Yun, Tai Feng, and Yi Chan. The 3 of them had stood out from hundreds of inner disciples. They had overcome all kinds of obstacles along the way, and each of them had performed their best martial arts. Towards the end, they had even defeated a few of the top 10 inner disciples of the last year. Among the 3, Yi Chan was the most talented one. With only the peak of the mid-condensing reality realm, he had won all his battles without losing a single one. He had also learned the half-step sword intent, which was the dream of every sword artist. His comprehensive ability was the best among the young generation of the Sky Cloud Martial School, and he was almost as famous as the core disciples. Of course, becoming one of the top 10 inner disciples was not the end of it. Next was the ranking competition. The ranking competition seemed complicated, but it was actually very simple. That was, the contestants would have to fight against the other 9 disciples one by one. As for those who had already fought against each other, the points would be calculated according to the results. For example, Yi Chan had beaten Feng Ping, Dong Haohua, and Tai Feng, so he had 6 points. He still had to fight against the other 6 disciples, including the Blood Shadow Blade, Meng Chong. For this competition, the leaders of the Sky Cloud Martial School had prepared more than 500 yuan qi pellets. Every disciple who participated in the competition could take one. After taking the yuan qi pellet, not only would they feel energetic, they would also be able to recover from minor injuries. After resting for about half an hour, the head elder saw that all 10 of them were full of energy, so he announced the start of the competition. Yi Chen's first opponent was the Rainbow Sword, Qiu Ruotong, but she gave up. After all, everyone knew how powerful Yi Chen was, so there was no need to waste any more time. The second opponent was Pei Xiaoqing, who also gave up. The third opponent was the Peach Hand, Zhou Ru. Although I don't have much hope, I still want to fight against you. Zhou Ruo, who had a beautiful face, lightly landed on the stage. Yi Chen nodded and said, "Let's start." Pa! Right from the start, Zhou Ruo used all of her power. The peach-colored Zhan Qi around her body burst out, attacking towards Yi Chan like a thunderbolt. It was obviously a big change from her previous casual fighting style. Before the palm power exploded, the stone pillar behind Yi Chan had already been shattered. What a domineering palm energy! A strange look flashed through Yi Chen's eyes. Without any hesitation, he directly waved his sword, which contained the half-step sword intent. Bang! Under the effect of the half-step sword intent, Yi Chen's attack was incomparably condensed. With only one attack, he had broken through Zhou Ruo's palm power. With a wave of her hand, Zhou Ruo set up a layer of peach-red qi barrier in front of her, and her whole body was sent flying. Yi Chen followed up with another slash. Zhou Ruo gritted her teeth. "If this move still can't do anything to you, I'll admit defeat." As she spoke, Zhou Ruo quickly formed a seal with her hands. Wave after wave of true energy frantically gathered in her hands. In the end, it transformed into a pink true energy bird. The bird spread its wings and shot out like a bolt of red lightning, unable to be seen by the naked eye. So fast! I didn't expect senior sister Zhou Ruo to have hidden her trump card as well. The spectating inner disciples exclaimed. Iron Fan Yi Qing laughed bitterly. His opponent did not use this move when they fought. Of course, he also had his own ultimate move that he had not used. His opponent should know this. The huge Zhan Qi bird arrived in a blink of an eye. It was about to hit Yi Chan. Yi Chen looked calm. The others might not be able to see the trajectory of the huge Zhan Qi bird, but he could. It was all thanks to his powerful soul power. A silver line flashed through the air. The hidden cloud sword in Yi Chen's hand had pointed at the weakest spot of the huge Zhanqi bird. All of a sudden, the huge Zhanqi bird became extremely unstable. With a popping sound, it disappeared into thin air. Zhou was shocked by Yi Chen's sword art. The blue bird seal was so fast, but it was still hit by his sword. Furthermore, it was the weakest spot of the bird. What kind of insight and control did he have? With a bitter smile, Zhou said, I have to admit, only you can compete with Meng Chong. I lost. The next battle was not Yi Chen's but Li Yun's. After all, continuous battles would take a lot of energy, and it would have a huge impact on the battle. Plus, Yi Chen's next opponent was Xiao Yi, who would definitely not admit defeat. It would be a tough battle for sure. Qiu Ruodong knew that she would not be able to compete with any one of the 10 people, but she still admitted defeat. Pei Xiaoqing and Li Yun started fighting. After exchanging dozens of moves, Li Yun executed the ultimate skill of sword light division. 14 sword lights shot out in a row. One of the sword lights had 2 layers of force, one bright and one dark. He managed to defeat Pei Xiaoqing without any mishaps. After that, it was the battle between Taifeng and Yi Qing. The two of them were evenly matched. After hundreds of attacks, there was no clear winner. However, towards the end of the battle, Taifeng, who had the support of his power, was getting more and more powerful. Yi Qing kept performing his ultimate skills, but he still could not make a comeback. He had no choice but to admit defeat. If the battle continued, he would definitely lose. One after another, the battles started and ended. Soon it was Blood Shadow Blade Meng Chong's turn. His opponent was Li Yun. Li Yun did not waste any time. He attacked immediately. With a wave of his hand, 14 sword lights were shot out. Break! Meng Chong's body moved along with his blade. The blood-red blade light was unstoppable. It easily shattered the incoming sword lights. As for that bright and dark sword light, it was instantly shattered by his fist. Li Yun yelled. Another 3 sword lights were shot out. These 3 sword lights were indeed huge. They almost covered half of the platform. They were flying towards Meng Chong in a triangular formation. Meng Chong did not dare to be careless. The blood-red light shot out from both of his arms and into his long blade. He had broken the incoming sword lights 3 times in a row. After that, he threw a punch at Li Yun's protective Zhanqi layer. Crackle! Blood-red lightning flashed. Li Yun's mouth was bleeding. He was thrown off the platform. Meng Chong's thunder fist is getting more and more powerful. Yi Qing thought to himself. Meng Chong got off the platform. Yi Chen and Xiao Yi got on the platform. If you want to challenge Meng Chong, you will have to get past me first. Xiao Ye's upper body bent, a misty green light shone, 2 gigantic Zhanqi arms extended out from his shoulders, one green and one green. The green one was a little illusory. The green one had chi flow rising like a burning flame. Just like a giant, Xiao Yi rushed towards Yi Chen with big steps, throwing out a punch. Tyrannical rampage. Out of everyone's expectation, Yi Chen did not use his sword skill. He made a fist with his left hand and threw out a punch. Puff, 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 puff. Under Xiao Ye's shocked gaze, the blue Zhanqi arm was broken into pieces. It turned into the purest Yuan Qi and disappeared in the air. Lose! Xiao Yi did not back off. He threw out an even more powerful green Zhanqi arm from his left shoulder. He wanted to defeat Yi Chen directly. Yi Chen yelled coldly, dominating one direction. Boom! He threw out a punch with a black light. The chi behind him was sucked into it. It was just like Taifeng's power. It clashed with Xiao Ye's green Zhanqi arm. Thump thump thump. Xiao Yi took a few steps back. The green Zhanqi arm was showing signs of collapsing. He was really shocked. The green Zhanqi arm was the evolved version of the blue Zhanqi arm. Its power was more than 50% stronger, but it couldn't even block a punch from his opponent. How was he supposed to fight? The green Zhanqi arm merged with his body. Xiao Yi waved his hand. I'm done. You are the best. Then he turned and walked off the platform. Chapter 115. As long as he beats Brother Yi Qing, it will be the battle between Brother Meng Chong and Brother Yi Chen. Brother Yi Qing should not be able to beat Brother Yi Chen. After all, he lost to Brother Taifeng. You're right. If Brother Meng Chong is still the champion this year, He probably won't get any good rewards. After all, last time he was rewarded with a low-rank Earth Realm fist art. Shocking Thunder Fist. But if Brother Yichan wins, he will definitely get a low-rank Earth Realm martial art. While the crowd was talking, the competition continued. In fact, although the ranking was still uncertain, it was already clear that the first and second place would be either Meng Chong or Yichan. The third to fifth place would be Taifeng, Xiao Yi and Yi Qing. The sixth to ninth place would be Zhou Ruo, Li Yun, Li Kuang and Pei Xiaoqing. Qiu Ruodong would be the last. In the first round, Li Yun lost to Li Kuang. In the second round, Pei Xiaoqing lost to Zhou Ruo. In the third round, Yi Qing lost to Xiao Yi. In the ninth round, Meng Chong walked onto the stage. Taifeng shook his head. I am not his opponent. I give up. Boom! The crowd on the martial field suddenly exploded. Taifeng had given up, which meant that Meng Chong would fight against Yichan in advance. This would undoubtedly be the most anticipated battle of the day. On the east side of the VIP seats, there was a row of teenagers. The oldest among them was only 18 or 19 years old, while the youngest was only 16 or 17. They were all wearing different clothes, but all of them had the unique cloud pattern of the Sky Cloud Martial School on their sleeves. The auras of this group of people were pure and vast. Nearly half of them could contend with Blood Shadow Saber Meng Chong. Some of them even far surpassed Meng Chong. They sat there and talked cheerfully. They were not affected by the atmosphere at all. They gave off an unfathomable pressure. Jingju, who do you think will win? Among them, a handsome teenager asked the teenager with a cold expression. The cold teenager said indifferently, boring. The handsome teenager smiled bitterly. Is there a need to be so cold? He turned around and asked the teenager in blue, Brother Luo, what do you think? The teenager in blue was indeed the second disciple of the Sky Cloud Martial School, Luo Hanshan. He lowered his eyes, thought for a while and said, I think it will be Yichan. Oh, why is that? The other person beside him looked surprised. Luo Hanshan said, Meng Chong is like a sharp blade that can cut through anything. However, if it's too sharp, it'll break easily, which makes it less beautiful. But Yichan is like a vast lake immeasurably deep. Since the beginning of the competition, he has been calm and unruffled. Thus, I deduced that it would be a long battle from the start. In the end, Yichan would be the one to persevere. Of course, speculations are just speculations after all. They can't be trusted. If we want to determine the victor, we'll have to fight. The handsome youth smiled and said, Senior Brother Luo's analytical ability has always been very strong, but I feel the same way. Whether the two of them will win will depend on the later stages. The girl in white, who was ranked 8th, suddenly said, Meng Chong will lose. The first person in line was a slightly older girl with plum blossom embroidery on her clothes. She mocked Su Jing. This is the first time I've seen your evaluation. Su Jing didn't say anything. The other people looked at Su Jing with different expressions. Some of them were nervous, some of them were admiring her. She had just become a core disciple last year, but now she was ranked 8th. Also, it seemed that she had not used all of her power to increase her rank. Otherwise, it would not be impossible for her to be in the top 5. From time to time, the inner disciples below the VIP seats would turn around and take a glance at her. They thought to themselves, this seat is for core disciples. If I can sit in this seat one day, how glorious would that be? 5 of the 10 platforms had already been destroyed. Yichan and Meng Chong were standing opposite each other on the platform that seemed to be relatively intact, staring at each other without blinking their eyes. Swoosh! Meng Chong took out his long blade and launched the first attack. A sharp blood-red blade light sliced through the air, hacking towards Yichan, who was not far away. Clang! No one knew when Yichan had also pulled out his sword. He waved out a stream of sword chi to block the incoming blade light. Take another 10 attacks. Meng Chong's expression was wild. The long blade in his hand was like a wild horse that had just run away from its reins. He crazily waved his blade towards Meng Chong. Ding ding ding. All of a sudden the entire platform was filled with bright sword chi and blood-red blade light. Their figures had already been completely covered by the light, and could not be seen by the naked eye. Shoo! Shoo! The two of them were blown back, and once again they faced each other. Awesome! Among all the inner disciples, You are the only one who can take 11 attacks from me with all of my power. It had been a long time since Meng Chong had felt this good. Yi Chen's power had made his blood boil, and he was filled with the desire to fight. If he could defeat Yi Chen, he would definitely be able to reach the next level. Yi Chen said, "Let's continue." "All right, let's continue." As soon as they finished talking, their bodies had already collided. The blood-red blade light and the sword chi crisscrossed, fighting against each other. Soon the platform was destroyed as well. Off the platform, all of the inner disciples were shocked. Apart from the first collision, it was impossible to tell who was fighting who had the upper hand, and who was at a disadvantage. All that could be seen was that the saber was faster than the previous one, and the sword was sharper than the previous one. Towards the end, the shockwave formed by the collision of the sword chi and the saber light was even more terrifying, destroying one platform after another nearby. The figures of the two could no longer be seen, and only the sword chi and the saber light could be seen sweeping from one platform to another, from the ground to the air, and from the air to the platform ruins. They were everywhere, and everywhere was the site of the battle. 100 attacks, 200 attacks, 300 attacks, 500 attacks. The two of them had already exchanged over 500 attacks, but there was still no clear winner. Yi Chen's half-step sword intent could not do anything to Meng Chong's blade power, and Meng Chong's fast blade power could not do anything to Yi Chen either. At this point, it was no longer a competition of power, but a competition of willpower and endurance. Whoever could last longer would be the winner. 1,000 attacks. No winner has been decided yet. Terrifying. An inner disciple looked at the sky. Right then the sun was setting, and the bright afterglow was shining on the martial field, making the battle look even more intense. He could not help but gasp. Yeah, it would be amazing if the others could block 10 attacks from Brother Meng Chong, but Brother Yi Chen had already exchanged over 1,000 attacks with him. Both of them seemed to have the upper hand. I wonder who will have the last laugh. All of a sudden, the blood-red blade light and the bright sword chi collided with each other, and then shot up into the sky. Waves of powerful shockwaves spread out in all directions, which even caused the platform to collapse. The crowd looked over and saw that Yi Chen's sword had blocked Meng Chong's long blade, and the two of them were frozen there. World-shocking thunder. Meng Chong clenched his left hand into a fist and threw it towards Yi Chen's head. Yi Chen sneered and threw out his left fist, which was shining with a black light. Crack! Like a thunderclap, both of them were sent flying backwards. Again, with the protection of the pure jade body-boosting spell, Yi Chen stomped on the platform behind him and shot towards Meng Chong like an arrow. Meng Chong was not scared at all. He threw out another punch. Boom! The two of them moved away from each other as soon as they made contact. There was a faint trace of blood on the corner of Meng Chong's mouth. On the VIP seats of the core disciples, Luo Hanshan sighed and said, Yi Chen has won. Meng Chong is still slightly weaker than him. It is not easy for him to be able to fight until now. But this Yi Chen is very powerful. He has been winning all the time. Even Meng Chong could not stop his rise. Chapter 116. Again. A blood-red light burst out from Meng Chong's body as he threw out a punch towards Yi Chen along with crackling thunder and lightning. Seemed like he was determined to win or die trying. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. As Meng Chong threw out his punch, Yi Chen could feel a shocking amount of electricity gathering in his body. His skin felt numb, and all of his hairs were standing up. He knew that he could not afford to be hit by that punch. Otherwise, even the pure jade body-boosting spell would not be able to protect him. Thunder and lightning had always been able to ignore defense. Dominating the king. The third movement of the tyrant fist art was thrown out. A dense black light was brought out by the fist power, forming an umbrella in front of Yi Chen, blocking out the attack of the electricity. Boom! The broken platform under their feet was split into two. One half was made up of electricity, while the other half was made up of scattered black light. Meng Chong puked out a mouthful of blood, which was evaporated in the air by the electricity. He was blown out for hundreds of meters, and finally landed heavily on the marble floor. Crack! The floor cracked under Meng Chong's feet. On the other side, Yi Chen was also blown out for 70 to 80 meters, leaving a crack on the floor. It was clear who would win. Looking down at his bare right arm, Yi-chan was shocked. If he had not performed the third movement of the Tyrant Fist Art, he would not have been able to win so easily. The Tyrant Fist Art was divided into 4 movements. The first style was called Tyrannical Rampage. It belonged to the aggressive type, and it could devour the opponent's chi gene for its own use. However, it could only be used against opponents who were slightly weaker than the user. Against opponents who were stronger than the user, the devouring effect could not be used. The second movement was called Dominating the World. It belonged to the defensive type. When the opponent attacked, it could absorb the yuan qi of the surrounding space and merge it into the fist power. The third movement was called Dominating the King. It belonged to the offensive and defensive type. When the punch was thrown out, an umbrella-shaped black light would form a defensive shield, blocking out the opponent's qi. At the same time, his own fist power would be able to attack the opponent without any hindrance. As for the strongest fourth move, Tyrannical Millennium, Yi-chan currently did not have enough Shen Qi to support it. Unless he was in a life or death situation, he absolutely could not use it. Otherwise, if he used up too much Shen Qi, he would not have the strength to protect himself. Letting out a mouthful of turbid air, Yi-chan raised his head and looked at Meng Chong. Meng Chong stabbed the long blade in his left hand into the ground. He grinned and said, "Great. Today you are more skilled than me. However, we still have a long way to go. Let's see who will have the last laugh. I'll wait for you." Although that was what he said, Yi-chan didn't really care about it. Up until now, no one who had been surpassed by him had ever surpassed him, just like Wang Gang, Wu Zongming, Huang Bingwen, Zhang Haoren and so on. If he was surpassed by someone else, then how could he even talk about becoming more powerful? How could he even talk about catching up with the top 4 young masters, and walk out of the Windy Nation and into the world? The world was way too big. The path of a martial artist was like sailing a boat against the current. If one did not keep moving forward, one would fall behind. If one day he was surpassed by someone else, then he would have to reflect on himself. Once Meng Chong was defeated, Yi-chan would definitely become the #1 inner disciple. The other people who had not fought against him before would not be able to stop him anymore. The audience in the VIP seats were all talking about this. Luo Hanshan said, "The most official competition in our school is the inner disciple ranking competition. Once you become one of the top 10 inner disciples, you will be qualified to challenge core disciples and replace them. I think Yi-chan and Meng Chong are already at the top of the core disciples. Tai Feng and Xiao Yi are also not bad. You guys should be careful." A few core disciples who were ranked at the bottom said, "Brother Luo, don't worry. We did not waste this year either. We will show them how powerful we are." Indeed, except for that Yi-chan and Meng Chong who are a bit tricky, the others will have to ask me first if I want to be a core disciple or not. Luo Hanshan smiled. The number of core disciples in the Sky Cloud Martial School had always been maintained at 24. If one of them became a core disciple, one of them would have to leave. No one wanted to lose their core disciple status. In the following days, it would definitely be a fierce competition. As for himself, he would also challenge the hidden fragrance sword Zhu Mei when the time was right. Luo Hanshan turned his head and glanced at the beautiful girl who had plum blossom embroidery on her clothes. When the last ray of light of the sunset shone on the horizon, the ranking competition was finally over. According to the ranking, the first place was Yi-chan, who had a perfect winning record. He had defeated 9 people, so he had 18 points. The second place was Meng Chong with 16 points, the third place was Tai Feng with 14 points, the fourth place was Xiao Yi with 12 points, the fifth place was Yi Qing with 10 points, the sixth place was Zhou Ro with 8 points, the seventh place was Li Kuang with 6 points, the eighth place was Li Yun with 4 points, the ninth place was Pei Xiaoqing with 2 points, and the 10th place was Qiu Ruodong with 0 points. When the ranking was announced, Yi Tianhao laughed out loud and said, "Chaner is now the #1 inner disciple of the Sky Cloud Martial School. He is the #1 genius in the history of our Yi family. The third leader of the Yi family, Yi Tang and Yi Xian, no one can be compared with him." Shin Yuqing said in an annoyed tone, "Look at you, people go to higher places, water flows to lower places. If Chaner wants to be compared, he should be compared with the core disciples of those famous martial institutions. Don't make him look bad." I'm just happy." Many important people around them cupped their hands and said, "Congratulations. Leader Yi, your son has already mastered the half-step sword intent at such a young age. He will definitely soar into the sky in the future. Leader Yi, if we have the chance, let's have a drink. Our son is not good enough, Leader Yi. You should ask your son to teach him a lesson. Yi Tianhao was in a good mood, he said. Not at all, not at all. If you are willing to give me face, please find some time to visit our Yi family. I will definitely welcome you. Of course, of course. The other important people all had their own thoughts, but no matter what they thought, Yi Chen's name had become really famous after today. 16 years old, he had mastered the half-step sword intent. Not to mention the Windy Nation, even in the entire South Shore region, he would not be bad. The only thing he was lacking was his cultivation. Of course, some people were looking forward to Yi Chen's growth, while some were planning to nip him in the bud. Zhu Liang was not the only one. For them it was very easy to kill a genius, but once this genius grew up it would not be that easy. They had to kill him as soon as possible. The head elder of the Sky Cloud Martial School slowly stood up. The inner disciple ranking competition has come to an end. Now the rewards will be given out. The 7th to 10th place will be rewarded with 300 low-rank soul stones. The 4th to the 6th place will be rewarded with 600 low-rank soul stones. The 2nd to the 3rd place will be rewarded with 1,000 low-rank soul stones. The 1st place will be rewarded with 2,000 low-rank soul stones and a low-rank Earth Realm martial art. Besides these, according to the decision made by the Elder Council, the number 1 inner disciple will go to the Emerald Martial Palace with the congratulatory team on the 9th of July. Going to the Emerald Martial Palace, that is a place to broaden one's horizons. All the disciples who are able to go there are not simple. At that time, all the elite martial institutions will definitely gather there, such as the top 4 child, the top disciples among the core disciples. I'm afraid it will not be that easy. All the martial institutions will definitely compete with each other. I heard that the top 10 inner disciples of the Emerald Martial Palace are all as powerful as the core disciples of the Sky Cloud Martial School. No wonder they decided to let Yi Chen go with them. Yeah, even if Yi Chen is not as powerful as them, with only his half-step sword intent, he will still be able to make the Sky Cloud Martial School look good. I see. How could the Elder Council's plan be hidden from the powerful figures who were always scheming against each other? Chapter 117. 2,000 low-rank soul stones and a low-rank Earth Realm martial art. If Yi Chen said he was not tempted, he would be lying. 2,000 low-rank soul stones would be worth 8 to 900,000 gold in the Northwest Auction House, and a low-rank Earth Realm martial art could be sold for millions of gold. Most of the small families in the Windy Nation might not be able to buy one even if they sold all their assets. Of course, the potential of the number 1 inner disciple was indeed worth this price, and the martial institutions did not lack martial arts. After all, a martial institution that had hundreds of years of history, it would be unreasonable for them not to have some martial arts. However, Yi Chen also knew that even if an outsider offered 10 million gold, the top management of the martial institution would not agree to sell a martial art. Martial arts were not to be shared with outsiders. However, after hearing the latter part of the message, Yi Chen paused a bit. Follow the congratulatory team to the Emerald Martial Palace in 1 month? This was out of his expectation, but he did not care too much about it. Whether he went or not, it was all arranged by the top management. All he needed to do was to follow the silent hills. In a vast mountain range, the fog never dissipated, and there was miasma everywhere. Deep in the mountains, there were often beast roars that could shake people's hearts. The sun was hanging high in the sky, and the golden light was blocked out by the fog. At first glance, there were colorful lights everywhere, bright and creepy. This was deep in the silent hills, and the natural yuan qi was especially rich. However, because of the miasma, warriors could not absorb it or else they would go crazy. On a small hill that was split open by something, Yi Chen stood with his hands behind his back, with an ancient-looking longsword hanging on his waist. He looked down and saw that in the fog hundreds of meters away, 2 huge shadows were colliding with each other from time to time, making earth-shaking noises. A woo! A horrifying roar was heard. Dozens of trees in front of him were knocked down, and a house-sized demonic wolf was blown towards him. The demonic wolf had no fur, and its body was covered with sharp thorns, which made its body 3 times bigger, and its blood-red pupils looked like it was about to drip blood. Bramble demonic wolf, Top rank 4 beast. No matter how hard the wind blew, Yi Chen's body did not move, only his clothes were fluttering. Dong 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 dong. The ground shook, and a silver-gray demonic bull that was even bigger than the bramble demon wolf walked out of the mist step by step. Its cold and merciless eyes first locked on the bramble demon wolf, and then looked at where Yi Chen was. Moo! The silver-gray demonic bull roared into the sky, and the mist twisted violently. Electric currents appeared on the surface of the nearby fallen leaves, burning them into nothingness. Yi Chen was slightly surprised. It was actually a rare silver electric demon bull. This was in existence even more dangerous than the bramble demon wolf. No wonder the bramble demon wolf couldn't beat it. The two demonic beasts were the size of a house. Their demonic aura soared to the sky, stirring up terrifying whirlwinds. 2 peak level 4 demonic beasts should be good for training. If the others knew what Yi Chen was thinking, they would definitely say that he was just talking nonsense. Demonic beasts were already much more powerful than warriors of the same level. Even the most talented warrior might not be able to win against a demonic beast, not to mention 2 top rank 4 demonic beasts, which were equivalent to peak level late condensing reality realm warriors. The bramble demon wolf looked at the silver electric demonic bull in fear. It lowered its body slightly. Its instinct told it that it had to kill any human that came in here. But the silver electric demonic bull in front of it was much more dangerous than this human. If it was not careful, it would be killed. Roar! 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 The bramble demon wolf roared at the silver electric demonic bull, as if it was sending some kind of message. After a while, the silver electric demonic bull let out an electric current from its nose. It stomped on the ground twice, and unexpectedly rushed out. Shoo! The silver electric demonic bull's huge body did not slow it down. Like a thick silver electric light, it rushed towards Yi Chen, who was on the hill. At the same time, the bramble demon wolf also attacked Yi Chen. Its body rammed towards the hill. Piss off! Clang! The hidden cloud sword was unsheathed, and its momentum was unpredictable. It easily hit the silver electric demonic bull's body. The silver electric demonic bull's fierce eyes were filled with shock. Its huge body flew back, smashing many old vines that were full of ancient trees. Boom! The hill under its feet collapsed, and the bramble demon wolf jumped out from the rubble. It opened its mouth and spat out a cloud of black air mixed with ice. Yi Chen's feet lightly touched the rubble that had not yet fallen, and his body rose straight up. A sword chi like a dragon from the 9 heavens, crazily shot down towards the bramble demon wolf. The bramble demon wolf was the same as the silver electric demonic bull. It did not expect Yi Chen's sword art to be so powerful. Its body flipped in the air and crashed into the flying boulders to avoid the sharp sword chi. Cloud impermanence, startling cloud, where do you think you can hide? With one punch, the bramble demon wolf's black air was shattered by the fist energy. The countless ice cubes were shattered by the fist energy, turning into ice shards that sprinkled down from the sky. Below, the sword chi, which was originally moving in a straight line, twisted a few times. Unexpectedly, like the clouds in the sky, it had no form, and slashed at the back of the bramble demon wolf. Crack! A few thorns were cut down, and the bramble demon wolf lost its balance and fell heavily on the ground, creating a huge pit. Crack! Silver lightning shot out from the side. It was the silver electric demonic bull that did not give up. Its speed was like lightning and its sound was like thunder. It was as fast as lightning, burning the air in front of it into a vacuum. Startling cloud. Yi Chen waved out a thick sword chi in the air. The sword chi was extremely aggressive. Wherever it went, the air was swept away, filled with endless explosive power. The silver electric demonic bull opened its mouth and spat out a ball of lightning, which clashed with the sword chi. Crack! Crack! The lightning was all broken, and the sword chi slashed on the silver electric demonic bull's forehead, leaving a deep sword mark that could reach the bone, and blood was flowing out. In the next moment, the silver electric demon cow lost its balance and fell headfirst to the ground, causing it to shake incessantly. Even the electricity around its body leaked out, causing the burnt ground to crack and turn black. Clumps of fertile weeds were burned to ashes. Suddenly climbing up from the ground, the silver electric demonic bull looked at Yi Chen with fear, not daring to attack again. Although its defense was very strong, it was not strong enough to ignore the sword chi. If it got hit too much, it would still be in danger. On the side, the bramble demon wolf could not help but lean towards the silver electric demonic bull, as if it was ready to join forces with it to attack and kill this powerful human. Earthrealm low-rank sword art, indeed powerful. Lightly landing on an ancient tree, Yi-chan looked down at the sword body and thought to himself. It had been more than half a month since the end of the ranking competition. Half a month ago, Yi-chan chose a sword art from many Earthrealm low-rank martial arts, called the Startling Cloud Sword Art. The clouds were unpredictable, and so was the Startling Cloud Sword Art. Every movement was full of changes, and even the cultivator could not completely control it, not to mention the opponent. In addition, the Startling Cloud Sword Art was also a very aggressive sword art. Once the sword was thrown out, the wind would stop and the clouds would be startled. Its lethality was extremely horrifying, and it was many times more powerful and faster than the lone peak of 13 swords. After training it, Yi-chan went to the Silent Hills alone, wanting to test the power of the sword art on the beasts. This battle was indeed powerful. Chapter 118. Not far away, the silver electric demonic cow and the bramble demon wolf roared at the same time, attacking towards Yi-chan from both sides. One of them was as fast as lightning, while the other one was as agile as a black smoke. Boom! The ancient tree was uprooted, and a huge amount of soil was sent flying in the air. Yi-chan jumped into the air and threw out a sword chi backhandedly. Puff! A deep sword mark appeared on the bramble demon wolf's back leg, and its body quickly fell onto the ground. It slid hundreds of meters away due to the inertia, and finally stopped after hitting another ancient tree. Standing up, the bramble demon wolf shook its dizzy head and stared at Yi-chan with a slight fear in its eyes. This human didn't seem to be very powerful, but up until now, it and the silver electric demonic cow still couldn't do anything to him. Instead, it was covered in dust, and its back leg was injured. If this continued, it and the silver electric demonic cow would probably be killed before they could kill Yi-chan. The silver electric demonic cow also wanted to retreat, but the bramble demon wolf hadn't retreated yet. So how could it retreat? I have almost understood the power of the sky cloud sword art. Now it's time to take care of them. Before, Yi-chan didn't use his half-step sword intent, and those sword chi were only normal sword chi. Turning around, Yi-chan waved his sword twice, and two sword chi that had been infused with the half-step sword intent were thrown out. Puff! Puff! A sword hole appeared on the foreheads of the silver electric demonic cow and the bramble demon wolf respectively. Their huge bodies fell heavily onto the ground, and no longer breathing. Without the protection of the beast chi, the bodies of the demonic beasts weren't as hard as expected, and were easily cut open. Inside each body was a bowl-sized pellet. The pellet of a top-rank 4 demonic beast was worth over 10,000 gold, and was put into Yi-chan's storage ring by Yi-chan. After that, some valuable demonic beast materials were also collected by Yi-chan. After that, Yi-chan stood up straight and looked at the deepest part of the Silent Hills. That was a true forbidden area. A few decades ago, a powerful force had sent experts to the depths to search for some rare and precious herbs. Unfortunately, they encountered a level 7 demonic beast, the ghost-faced demonic cow. Out of more than 100 people, only one person managed to escape, but he died a few days later. The reason was that the demonic chi in his body was too strong, and he died of madness. Since then, no one dared to enter. A rank 7 demonic beast. Yi-chan could not imagine it at all, since it was equivalent to an astral-reaching realm warrior. Not to mention Yi-chan, even the leaders of the top 5 martial institutions would not be able to handle a single attack from it. But it was hard to say whether it was true or not, since besides the rumors, no one had actually seen it with their own eyes. The only survivor from decades ago had already gone insane when he came out. Shaking his head, Yi-chan leaned to the side and leaped onto an ancient tree that was over 100 feet tall. With a few flashes, he disappeared without a trace. Not long after Yi-chan left, a figure shot through the mist. Pap! Lightly stepping on the ground, the middle-aged man saw the 2 demonic beast corpses lying on the ground. He couldn't help but curse. I finally found out where this brat went. Who would have thought that he would go to the deepest part of the Silent Hills? The mist here is so thick that people can't even look at it directly. You can't tell anything from 100 steps away. Otherwise, how could I let him leave safely? I would have killed him on the spot. This man was indeed Zhu Liang, the middle-aged man who had watched the inner disciple ranking competition of the Sky Cloud Martial School half a month ago. At the same time, he was also the intelligence master of the Purple Sun Martial School. He had sent his warriors to guard the bottom of the Windy Mountain, ready to kill Yi Chan the moment he went out alone. However, after Yi Chan went down the mountain, he went straight into the Silent Hills. By the time Zhu Liang heard the news, it was already too late. He could only follow and try his luck to see if he could run into Yi Chan. Brat, you sure are lucky. But next time you will die for sure. Zhu Liang's eyes were filled with killing intent. Roar! Right at this moment, a majestic roar sounded. Following that, the sky suddenly darkened. Dark clouds covered the sky, covering the radiance of the fiery sun. Such a powerful beast Qi. It is at least a level 6 beast. Zhu Liang's face was full of fear. He hurried to run away. Far away, a beam of black light that was as thick as a water bucket shot out. Along the way, trees collapsed and mountains were pierced. The aftermath of the black light swept out a deep ravine that extended straight into the earth. The speed of the black light was too fast. Zhu Liang had no time to dodge. He roared, and a burning light suddenly rose from his body, protecting him tightly. Boom! The burning light was shattered. Zhu Liang was bleeding from every orifice, and his clothes were torn. Little bastard! This beast must have been provoked by you. Zhu Liang came without a sound, so he did not attract any beast's attention. Thinking about it, he realized that the battle between Yi Chan and the beast was too loud, and it had attracted more powerful beasts from the deeper parts of the Silent Hills. Zhu Liang had become the scapegoat. Without caring about his wounded body, Zhu Liang pushed his Zhanqi as hard as he could. His body turned into a burning light and shot far away. At the same time, he threw a dark red pellet into his mouth. After a while, the source of the black light finally appeared in the distance. Its huge body was standing in the middle of the hills. It was tens of meters tall and it was a huge black python. If the mist was gone, people would see a shocking scene from the sky. A ravine stretched from dozens of miles away to here. In other words, the black light was shot from dozens of miles away. Such a terrifying range was unheard of. If it was a little closer, whether Zhu Liang could survive or not would be a problem. After all, the attack power of the black light would definitely be reduced if it was too far away. Seeing that the aura had disappeared, the black python bumped the mountain next to it with its huge head. The mountain shook a few times and a few huge cracks appeared on the wall, making a cracking sound. Lowering its towering upper body, the giant black python slithered back in the direction it came from, crushing ancient trees one after another. Among the thousands of mountains, there was a magnificent valley. The valley was full of trees, and there were lakes of different sizes, just like the stars in the sky. In a yard next to a lake, 3 young girls were sitting and chatting. Sister Ji, have you heard about the Inner Disciple ranking competition that was held in the Sky Cloud Martial School half a month ago? The round-faced girl in green clothes suddenly asked. The beautiful girl with an aloof temperament said indifferently, "Is that so? I don't think there is anyone worth paying attention to in the Sky Cloud Martial School." The pretty girl next to her nodded and said, "The Sky Cloud Martial School is ranked last among the top 5 martial institutions. The top 10 inner disciples are only as powerful as the inner disciples of our Emerald Martial Palace. And the top 10 inner disciples of our Emerald Martial Palace are only as powerful as the core disciples in the Sky Cloud Martial School." The round-faced girl said, "I heard that there are 2 geniuses in this year's Sky Cloud Martial School. One is called Meng Chong, and the other is called Yi Chan. They are both at the top of the core disciples in the Sky Cloud Martial School." Yi Chan. The beautiful girl and the pretty girl looked at the round-faced girl in surprise. The round-faced girl asked confusedly, "What's wrong?" The pretty girl asked, "How is that, Yi Chan? He beat Meng Chong, who was the top 10 inner disciples in the last year's Sky Cloud Martial School, and won the first place. I heard that he is very powerful." The beautiful girl was slightly surprised, but she didn't care about it anymore. So what if he was the top 10 inner disciples in the Sky Cloud Martial School? She was now one of the 4 core disciples of the Emerald Martial Palace. There was no comparison between them. The round-faced girl continued, that Yi Chan is not only very powerful, But he has also mastered the half-step sword intent. Right now, everyone in the Windy Nation is talking about him. What? The pretty girl and the beautiful girl couldn't believe it. They subconsciously thought that the two of them only had the same name, and could not be the Yichun they knew. Chapter 119. Days passed by. When there were only 10 days left until the 9th of July, Yichun felt a bit strange. Why hadn't the higher-ups prepared to go to the Emerald Martial Palace yet? The Emerald Martial Palace was 70,000 miles away from the Sky Cloud Martial School. Even if he rode the half-beast horse, the Ghost-Eye Jade Lion, it would still take him 13 to 14 days to get there. Just like that, another 5 days passed. Yichun didn't care about going to the Emerald Martial Palace anymore. Since the higher-ups weren't in a hurry, why should he? The Emerald Martial Palace was not a place he wanted to go. The 7th of July. Yichun was training his Zhanqi in the yard. He was only one step away from the late-condensing reality realm. Although it was impossible for him to make a breakthrough in a short period of time, he still wanted to give it a try. After all, for him, the difference between the peak of the mid-condensing reality realm and the late-condensing reality realm was too huge. At least if he could reach the same cultivation level, he would be able to compete with all the young warriors, even if he had to face young Master North Snow or young Master Duanmu. Crack! The low-rank soul stone in his hand cracked into 2 pieces. Yichun opened his eyes with a regretful look on his face. With his current cultivation level, it was still too difficult for him to make a breakthrough. It would still take him a while to reach the late-condensing reality realm. Bang bang bang, suddenly someone knocked on the door. Yichun thought it was Wu Zongming, so he yelled, "Coming!" Opening the door of the yard, a young man that Yichun had never seen before appeared in front of him, wearing black clothes. "I am the executor disciple. The head elder asked me to inform you that it is time to go to the Emerald Martial Palace. Go to the welcoming plaza now," the young man said indifferently. Yichun was surprised. "Go now? Can I get there in 2 days?" Shaking his head, Yichun didn't understand, so he responded, "All right, I will go now." The executor disciple left. Yichun went back to his room, prepared a few sets of clothes and some necessities, then cleaned the room a bit, closed the door and walked to the welcoming plaza. On the grand and flat welcoming plaza, 4 people were standing there. The 2 people in the middle were the first elder, who was over 60 years old, and the 4th elder, who had a sturdy body. The sense of power released from their bodies was as deep as the ocean. One of them was Luo Hanshan, who was wearing a blue robe, and the other one was Su Jing, who was wearing a white robe. "Great Elder, 4th Elder." Yichun saluted the 2 elders. The Great Elder smiled and said, "Yichun, have you made any progress this month?" Hearing him, a smile also appeared on the 4th Elder's face. They had already heard about how fast Yichun had improved. 1 year ago he was still a mortal realm stage 6 warrior, and now he had already reached the peak of mid-condensing reality realm. Not to mention that he had a great comprehensive ability. He had mastered all the martial arts he had learned to the highest level. Bringing him to the Emerald Martial Palace this time was more or less to gain some face for the Sky Cloud Martial School. Otherwise, it would have been better to bring other core disciples. After all, compared to the top 5 core disciples, Yichun's foundation was still a bit weak. Yichun said, "I haven't made much progress in my cultivation, but I've just learned the shocking cloud swordsmanship." "You can't rush to raise your cultivation." "What? You've learned the shocking cloud swordsmanship?" The 4th elder slightly nodded. Then he was shocked and stared at Yichun in shock. Yichun nodded. He didn't need to hide this kind of thing. Not to mention, with the attention he was getting now, he wouldn't be able to keep it a secret for too long. Lu Hanshan was shocked. Learning the shocking cloud swordsmanship in only a month? What kind of abnormal martial arts talent was this? The shocking cloud swordsmanship was a low-rank Earth Realm sword art. Ordinary people might not even be able to learn it in 5 years. If it were Lu Hanshan himself, it would take him at least half a year. In the entire Sky Cloud Martial School, perhaps only Zhu Mei could learn it in 3 to 4 months. However, compared to Yichun, the gap was not just a little bit, it was double or triple. The Great Elder couldn't believe it. Martial artists who have learned the shocking cloud swordsmanship will have a strong shocking cloud sword aura when they are fighting. He didn't continue his words, because Yichun's temperament suddenly changed. Wave after wave of illusory sword aura gushed out. His whole body seemed like a treasured sword that had been unsheathed. His sword aura was unstable, but it was filled with a horrifying explosive power. It is indeed the shocking cloud swordsmanship. I can't believe he can use it so easily. The great elder gasped in shock. He realized that he had underestimated Yi-chan after all. However, he couldn't blame himself, because a genius who had mastered the half-step sword intent was not someone he could easily guess. Among the three of them, only Su Jing didn't seem to be surprised. Caw. At this moment, a high-pitched bird song came from the top of the windy mountain. The bird song was short and high-pitched, along with a majestic aura. Yi-chan looked towards the direction of the sound and was surprised. On the precipitous peak, a giant bird swooped down. This giant bird had a majestic physique, and its wingspan was more than 10 meters. Its entire body was covered in dark green feathers, and under the sunlight, it glowed with a metallic luster. Its pair of claws could easily grab a house, and they were curved like an anchor. Lu Hanshan introduced the bird to Yi-chan. This is the guardian spirit beast of our Sky Cloud Martial School. Wind Vulture. Wind Vulture? Yi-chan had heard of this name before. In the easternmost area of the Windy Nation, there was a great devil grassland. There were countless demonic beasts living on the grassland, among which the half-demon horse, the ghost-eye jade lion, was the most famous one. However, people living near the grassland didn't think so. In their eyes, the most famous demonic beast was the king of the great devil grassland, the 5th-level wind vulture. The wind vulture could travel over 40,000 miles per day. It was as fast as lightning, and was over 10 times faster than the half-demon horse. It was perfect for traveling, but it was not easy to catch it. Although it was only a 5th-level demonic beast, which was equivalent to a mid-class Bing Yuan realm martial artist, even a late-class Bing Yuan realm martial artist might not be able to catch up with it. Besides, even if a late-class Bing Yuan realm martial artist managed to catch it, it would be extremely difficult to tame it. Yi-chan didn't expect that the Sky Cloud Martial School had a 5th-level wind vulture. No wonder they weren't in a hurry to go to the Emerald Martial School. With the wind vulture's speed, it would only take them 2 days to get there. Not only would it save them a lot of time and effort, it would also show the school's prestige. Whoosh! A fierce gust of wind blew, and the wind vulture landed in the middle of the plaza. The head elder said, "Come on up." After saying that, the head elder flashed across the air and landed on the wind vulture's broad and flat back. When everyone had boarded the wind vulture, the head elder reminded them, "Hold on, the wind vulture is very fast." Luo Hanshan grinned and said, "Head elder is right. The first time I rode on the wind vulture, I almost fell from the sky. It's unbelievably fast." Hearing this, Yi-chan and Su Jing didn't dare to be careless. They both silently activated their Zhenqi. Whoosh! Whoosh! The wind vulture fiercely flapped its wings for a few times, then suddenly leaped up into the air like a sharp arrow. The wind vulture's wings were tucked behind its back to reduce the air resistance. The speed of the wind vulture, which was close to the sound barrier, was unimaginably fast. As if it was riding on a rocket, the air that was blowing towards its face was no different than a sharp knife, cutting its skin. Yi-chan planted his feet on the ground, and activated his protective Zhenqi to protect his face from the knife-like air currents. Soon the wind vulture flew high up into the clouds, flying far away. Chapter 120. Above the ocean of clouds, the wind vulture flapped its wings and flew hundreds of meters away. The shrill, long-lasting sonic booms behind it didn't reach anyone's ears, because the wind vulture's flying speed had already surpassed the speed of sound. The head elder and the 4th elder were standing in front of the wind eagle's back like two towering mountains, relieving most of the pressure on Yi-chan and the other two. Otherwise, only the strong airflow caused by the supersonic speed of the eagle could easily blow them away and make them fall from the sky. Brother Yi, you have to be mentally prepared for this trip to the Emerald Martial Palace. I believe you also know why the higher-ups want you to come with us. Su Jing abruptly used her Zhenqi to talk to Yi-chan. Yi-chan nodded. Why isn't senior sister Zhu Mei here? None of the head disciples from the top 4 martial institutions will go there, unless one of them has reached the class Bing Yuan realm and is on par with young Master Emerald. I see. Yi-chan thought for a while and realized that Zhu Mei was right. If Zhu Mei went, she would inevitably be compared with young Master Emerald. But now she didn't want to go. So everyone could only compare the second disciples of each martial institution. Just then, the fourth elder said to Yi Chan and the other two with his Zhanqi, "There is a large number of flesh demons in front of us. Be careful not to get sucked into them." Flesh demon? Yi Chan froze for a second. This was a kind of demonic beast that floated in the air without any intelligence. It was shaped like a huge meatball and had a lot of scary-looking mouths. Normally, 3 mouse would be a rank 1 meat beast, 6 mouse would be a rank 2 meat beast, 9 mouse would be a rank 3 meat beast, and so on and so forth. Flesh demons usually lived by inhaling and exhaling the chi of heaven and earth. Occasionally, they would eat meat. Before he could think about it, disgusting meatballs appeared in the vast sea of clouds in front of him. These meatballs were brownish-red in color, and their bodies were covered with mouths with sharp teeth. The largest one was no different from a small mountain, and the smallest one was the size of a water buffalo. They floated in the air with the wind, and if a flying beast passed by, they would open their mouths and release a terrifying suction force, swallowing it into their stomachs. Sky-burning palm. The wind vulture was incredibly fast. Seeing that it was about to break into the group of meat spirit beasts, the fourth elder let out a resonant growl and pushed his palm out. Rumble! A large number of flesh demons exploded and were burned into nothingness. The shockwave even tore a large hole in the sea of clouds. Yi Chan was secretly shocked. Late clasping Yuan realm martial artists are indeed extraordinary. Every single move of theirs has the destructive power to destroy mountains. Suddenly, the wind vulture swayed intensely and slowed down. The few of them turned their heads to look. Unbeknownst to them, a meatball the size of a small hill had appeared on their right rear. The largest mouth on the meatball was wide open, sucking in the air and the sea of clouds in a spiral. It was like a huge bottomless pit, swallowing everything. Yi Chan and the other two had low cultivation bases, so they were about to be sucked out. The first elder made his move. He raised the index and middle fingers of his right hand and drew a line in the air. Poochie! A purplish golden ray of light extended out. It was as sharp as a blade, and it split the meatball into two. The cut was smooth without a trace of roughness. The fourth elder said in admiration, "A fifth-grade meat beast's defensive power is even more terrifying than a real mountain. It seems that your purple light finger has already reached the highest level. It can cut a mountain as if it was nothing." It took me over 10 years to reach the highest level of this mid-rank Earthrealm finger art. I can't compare with you. The first elder gave a bitter smile. Yi Chan was speechless. The first elder was obviously talking about him. Hearing him, the fourth elder was speechless again. He had seen all kinds of geniuses, but he had never seen a genius who could learn a low-rank Earthrealm martial art within a month. What a freak! Above another piece of sea of clouds, a hazy white light flashed like a bolt of lightning. It seemed to be able to travel a mile within a blink of an eye. If one looked carefully, one would be able to see that the white light was actually a huge white bird. The white bird had a strong and muscular body, with a pair of dark yellow claws under its belly. There were 4 people standing on the back of the white bird. The leading 2 were over 40 years old. They were wearing white robes with golden edges and snowflake patterns on the cuffs. Behind the 2 were 2 young men. The one on the left had a strong and muscular build. He was a head taller than the 2 in front. His eyes were extremely sharp and aggressive, as if he was being attacked by a heavy blade. The one on the right looked ordinary, wearing white robes. If he was thrown into a crowd, it would be hard to find him. However, when one looked at his eyes, one would feel that he was not ordinary at all. His pure crystal-like eyes gave people a soul-stirring feeling. The blade light seemed to be invisible. It seemed to be able to transform into the blade intent. It was indeed the North Snow Quick Blade Lynch. As for the strong and muscular teenager, he was the second core disciple of the North Snow Martial Academy, Blade Yu. We, the North Snow Martial Academy, never liked to fight. But even though we don't like to fight, it's still a shame to fall behind others. You two have to work hard. The middle-aged man on the right reminded them with a smile on his face. Yu chuckled and said, "I admit that I am no match for Zhuang Fei. But except for him, I, Yu, am not afraid of anyone in the younger generation of the Windy Nation." At this moment, the bearded middle-aged man, who seemed to be the leader of the group, sighed and said, "In recent years, the North Snow Martial Academy has started to lose its strength. There haven't been any outstanding geniuses appearing in the ranking competitions of the inner disciples. However, the Sky Cloud Martial School is quite lucky. They actually have a disciple who has mastered the half-step sword intent. Lynch's eyes lit up. He was believed by the leader of the group, Shui to be the one who had the highest chance of mastering the blade intent. Now that he knew that there was a disciple who had mastered the half-step sword intent, and was only one step away from mastering the real sword intent, he was a bit excited. The rain was pouring down. A loach-like black-scaled demonic beast was swimming in the sea of clouds. Every time it lurked and reappeared, it would be several hundred meters away. Coupled with its huge body and terrifying appearance, ordinary people would think that a legendary evil dragon had appeared in the world and was going to harm the human world. Junior Sister Yuan, you've made great progress in the past few months. Otherwise, we wouldn't have asked you to come with us to the Emerald Martial Palace. There were 5 people standing on the beast's head. A young man with an umbrella said to the tall girl with a smile. The tall girl had a pretty face and a pair of straight and long legs. If Yi Chun were here, he would definitely recognize her. She was indeed Yuan Shuamei, who had helped the Ling family with the mission. Compared to a few months ago, her qi was much more powerful. Obviously, she had made great progress. Yuan Shuamei smiled lightly and said, I think the elders want me to see the world. Plus, following Brother Nangong will definitely not be a bad thing. How come all the female disciples of the Rudra Martial School are so talkative? I am the only one who is dumb. The young man with the umbrella said sarcastically. Hee. Yuan Shuamei laughed. Caw. From afar, an ear-piercing beast roar came out, shaking the sea of clouds. The elder of the Rudra Martial School, who was standing in the front, raised his head and looked over, but couldn't see anything. He murmured to himself, it should be the double-headed Bat King from the Purple Sun Martial School. It is quite fast. A few hundred miles away from the black-scaled demon beast, a black-red two-headed bat with a wingspan of more than 10 meters swept across the sky. On the back of the bat 4 people were standing. One of them was Ouyang Ming, who had a conflict with Yi Chan in the Northwest Auction House. Beside him was a short and skinny teenager, who looked very ordinary, even a bit ugly, which formed a sharp contrast with Ouyang Ming. Piercing through the sea of clouds, the 4 of them rushed towards the southwest. Chapter 121. July 8th afternoon. The wind vulture darted out of the clouds and lowered its speed to below the speed of sound. Yi Chan only felt his vision brighten, and the mountains and rivers below were all imprinted in his eyes. But very quickly he was dumbfounded. In the area of 500 kilometers below, the mountain peaks rose and fell without end. Some were lofty and majestic, some were verdant and elegant, some were shaped like dragons, and some were crouching like tigers. The dense energy of heaven and earth converged into a thin layer of mist that coiled around the peaks of the mountain peaks, and it gave off a special feeling of immortality. Between the mountains were lakes of various sizes. Looking down from above, the smallest of the lakes was only the size of a fingernail. They were scattered all over the place, and they were of various colors. At a glance it was impossible to tell how many there were. In the center of this area, dozens of precipitous mountain peaks converged to form a valley. The color of the valley was dark green, like the primordial jadeite formed by heaven and earth, exquisite without losing its grandeur. Looking inside, there were hundreds of lakes of various sizes in the valley. Buildings were built around the lakes in an orderly fashion, contrasting with the environment outside the valley, forming a large and a small scene. What a wonderful place! Yi Chun opened his mouth and spat out these words. Luo Hanshan explained to Yi Chan, there are a total of 1,332 mountains and 9,800 lakes around the Emerald Martial Palace, which is known as the 1,000 Mountains and 10,000 Rivers. Apart from this, on the mountains that form the Emerald Martial Palace, there is a kind of stone called fragrant jade, which emits a nice aroma all year round, and is called jade fragrance. Combining these two, it becomes the famous 1,000 Mountains and 10,000 Rivers jade fragrance. Once the martial artists from the Windy Nation and even other nations mention this name, they will definitely think of the Rank 7 martial institution, the Emerald Martial Palace. Yi Chan praised, thousands of mountains and tens of thousands of rivers, jadeite fragrance lingers, it really makes one daydream. The head elder snorted coldly and said, "It is indeed a paradise, but the Emerald Martial Palace is only a latecomer. 3,000 years ago, the Rank 6 Martial Institution, Mountain and Water Pavilion, used to occupy this place." That's right. Back then the Emerald Martial Palace was just a small unranked martial institution. The first leader of the Emerald Martial Palace accidentally found the ruins of the Mountain and Water Pavilion, and found the incomplete great art of mountain and water from there. He trained hard for more than 10 years, and once he was born he became famous in the martial world, and built a solid foundation for the Emerald Martial Palace. The fourth elder's voice was filled with envy and passion. It was a remnant of the great art of landscape. It seemed to be very powerful. Yichen thought. The wind vulture flew over thousands of mountains and rivers, arriving at the entrance of the Emerald Valley. The entrance of the valley had a radius of hundreds of zhang, and the terrain was flat. Quite a few famous warriors had entered the valley in groups, and some important ones had also come on the back of their beasts, just like the Sky Cloud Martial School. But of course, the mounts of their beasts were obviously not as good as the wind vultures. The wind vulture landed on the ground along with a fierce gale. An outer elder of the Emerald Martial Palace walked up to them with 4 deacons. "Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry for not going out to greet you." The head elder let the wind vulture move freely, then grinned and said, "It seems that we've arrived first. Haha, the Sky Cloud Martial School has been very high profile recently. You're number 1 in everything, but what's the point of fighting for number 1 in small matters?" The double-headed giant bat flew over quickly, and the middle-aged man in the lead opened his mouth and said. The fourth elder's face was filled with displeasure. The middle-aged man's name was Zhu, and he was about the same age as the first elder. Because he practiced a special cultivation technique, he looked to be in his 40s, and his qi and blood were vigorous. Taking a deep breath, the fourth elder raised his voice and said, "I didn't believe it at first. It turns out that people from the Purple Sun Martial House all have loud voices. I heard your roar from tens of miles away. Having a loud voice isn't a bad thing. I'm just afraid that some people don't have the energy to shout loudly." The two-headed bat landed on the ground. Zhu took the lead and walked down. "Look, the Sky Cloud Martial School and the Purple Sun Martial School are arguing again. Among the top 5 martial institutions, the Purple Sun Martial School and the Sky Cloud Martial School have the most grievances. I heard that when the Sky Cloud Martial School was encircling the remaining forces of the 9 evil cult, the Purple Sun Martial School set up a trap for the Sky Cloud Martial School, causing a lot of powerful martial artists of the Sky Cloud Martial School to suffer heavy casualties. After a few years, the Sky Cloud Martial School was reduced to a rank 9 martial institution. However, the Sky Cloud Martial School was not a force to be trifled with. They released fake news and tricked the previous leader of the Purple Sun Martial School to the place where the remaining forces of the 9 evil cult gathered, causing him to die without a complete corpse. There's such a secret. No wonder the two forces have always been like fire and water. Many people nearby were discussing in low voices. Normally, people from the Emerald Martial Palace would be happy to see the two forces fighting each other to the death. However, this was the territory of the Emerald Martial Palace, and tomorrow was the celebration banquet. If they really let them fight, the Emerald Martial Palace would lose all of its face. A few outer elders of the Emerald Martial Palace hurriedly said, "Your accommodations have been prepared. Please follow us." Huh. Zhu flicked his sleeves and left. Ouyang Ming, who was behind him, threw a meaningful glance at Yi Chan. On the other side, the head elder's anger disappeared. He said to Yi Chan and the others, "Let's go." After the two groups of people had left, it suddenly started raining. The black-scaled beast carried the people from the Rudra Martial School to this place. Inside the Emerald Martial Palace, numerous lakes appeared in front of them, all calm and peaceful. The Emerald Martial Palace is indeed a rank 7 martial institution. It is indeed a beautiful place. Wow, compared to this place, my place is like a mountain, totally not at the same level. The lotuses in the lake are all precious herbs, the green lotus. And those fishes, they are all rare ancient fishes. Hearing people's praises, Yi Chan had to admit that in terms of environment, the windy mountain of the Sky Cloud Martial School was miles ahead of the Emerald Martial Palace. It was not even worth mentioning. He wondered how the environment of the North Snow Martial Academy, which was also a rank 7 martial institution, would be. There were many people who came to congratulate the Emerald Martial Palace. Those who did not have much influence were basically arranged to stay near the lakes in the outer area of the Emerald Martial Palace, where there were many beautiful courtyards. Those who had some influence were arranged to stay in the inner area, where the environment was much better. As one of the top 5 martial institutions, the Sky Cloud Martial School was arranged to stay in the innermost area, which was close to the main buildings of the Emerald Martial Palace. On the road between the lakes, Yi-chan inadvertently glanced over, and a strange look flashed across his eyes. In front of him, a group of young men and women in green robes were talking and laughing. Judging from the Zhanqi vibration, they were not any weaker than the top-ranked inner disciples of the Sky Cloud Martial School. 2 of them were releasing immeasurable Zhanqi, which meant that they had obviously reached the level of the top-ranked core disciples of the Sky Cloud Martial School. The one on the left had a graceful figure and an extremely beautiful appearance, like an orchid in a deserted valley. Her every move attracted the thoughts of the male disciples. Standing next to her was a tall and straight male disciple. He was handsome and had a noble temperament. There was a faint aura of a king on his body. He was obviously not an ordinary person. Luo Hanshan, who was standing beside Yi-chan, recognized the beautiful girl. She was Ji Xuan, who had accompanied the Pomend, Lu Wuxiang, to visit the Sky Cloud Martial School half a year ago. She was a disciple of the Ji family, and judging from what had happened that day, she seemed to be closely related to Yi-chan. "Brother Yi, we have arrived at our place, let's go." Luo Hanshan patted on Yi-chan's shoulder. Yi-chan took back his sight. His expression didn't change at all. Led by an outer elder of the Emerald Martial Palace, the 5 of them walked towards the luxurious yard beside the huge lake. From afar, Ji Xuan saw that familiar silhouette and slightly frowned. The tall and handsome male disciple standing beside her asked with concern, "Sister Ji, what's wrong?" "Nothing. Brother sure." Ji Xuan was sure that that man was Yi-chan. She didn't expect that after half a year, he, who was only at Mortal Realm Stage 6, had already reached such a high level. If that was all, she wouldn't have been too surprised. But what she didn't expect was that besides the rapid improvement of his cultivation, he had also mastered the half-step sword intent, which was the dream of every sword artist. In just a couple of days, the name Yi-chan had spread across the entire Windy Nation. Among all the martial artists, there wasn't a single person who didn't know about him. His fame had even caught up with the top and second disciples of all the top martial institutions. Chapter 122. The luxurious yard was called the Green Willow House. It had a main yard and 7 small yards. Yi-chan lived in the small yard on the east side. Obviously, the yard had been thoroughly cleaned. There was not a single leaf on the ground, the corners were clean, and the flowers in the small garden in the middle had also been carefully trimmed. Entering the room, Yi-chan saw that the tables and chairs were all shiny and clean, and had a faint aroma. After looking around for a while, Yi-chan walked out. When he walked past Su Jing's yard, he heard a thunderous sound coming from inside. Yi-chan smiled. Su Jing had always been a quiet girl. She would only cultivate when she had nothing to do. She rarely took the initiative to communicate with others. After their last meeting, Su Jing only nodded to greet Yi-chan. Without disturbing her, Yi-chan started to walk away. Outside the yard was a sparkling lake. Every 100 meters around the lake, there was a yard that was as luxurious as the Green Willow House. Beside the lake, rows of willows were planted. The willows were touching the water surface, swaying along with the breeze. The Emerald Martial Palace is indeed a rank 7 institution. Even the place they used to receive their guests is so beautiful. Yi-chan took a deep breath. He felt that the natural yuan qi around him was much richer and purer than in the Windy Mountain. It was also easier to convert it into zhanqi. After enjoying the view for a while, Yi-chan was about to go back to his yard to cultivate. Yi-chan. A tall girl walked towards him along the lake. It was Yuan Shuamei from the Rudra Martial School. Yi-chan smiled. "Long time no see. How did you know I was here?" "Guests from influential institutions all live beside this lake. I saw you when I walked out of the yard." Yuan Shuamei stopped 3 meters in front of Yi-chan. Yi-chan nodded, then suddenly said in surprise, "You have reached the late condensing reality realm." Congratulations. There's nothing to congratulate me about. You, on the other hand, have improved a bit too fast. Not only have you reached the peak of the mid-condensing reality realm in just a few months, you have also managed to comprehend the half-step sword intent, which even I am jealous of. Sai, comparisons are always odious. Yuan Shuamei said with admiration and admiration. Yi-chan rubbed his nose. The news travels fast. Of course. Yuan Shuamei rolled her eyes at Yi-chan and said, everything else is fine. But the fact that you've already comprehended the half-step sword intent is way too shocking. Even the leader of our Rudra martial school had praised you as a top genius, a rare sword artist from the Windy Nation, and that you have a great chance to comprehend the true sword intent. You didn't call me just to praise me, did you? Hearing him, Yuan Shuamei looked at Yi-chan with hope and said, how did you master the half-step sword intent? Do you have any experience to share with me? Just like Yi-chan, she was the #1 inner disciple of the Rudra martial school. Her fighting power was no weaker than ordinary core disciples. If she could master a little bit of the sword intent, her power would definitely increase. Besides, if she could master a little bit of the sword intent, it would be much easier for her to step into the next level. Originally, she didn't have any plans, but the person who was closest to mastering the sword intent was Yi-chan. So it was better to ask him than to try and figure it out herself. Yi-chan smiled bitterly in his mind. So she came here for the sword intent. I don't really know much about the sword intent, but if you want to talk about experience, I do have some. Tell me about it. Yuan Shuamei's eyes lit up. Yi-chan said the spirit, qi, and soul are perfectly merged into one point under the control of nature, and then released in the form of a sword. I think this should be the initial form of the sword intent. Of course, Yi-chan wouldn't say too much. In his words, there were not only the ancient explanations but also his own thoughts. All in all, it was ambiguous and mysterious. Yuan Shuamei was lost in her thoughts. After a long while, she came back to her senses and said with a happy face, thank you so much. I can feel that the sword intent has become much clearer in my mind. Maybe I can really figure it out. Don't worry, I won't tell anyone about this. Even if Yi-chan didn't care about it, she wouldn't say it out loud. Everyone was selfish. If one less person could master the sword intent, they would feel superior. Yi-chan was surprised. Is it really that easy to understand? However, what he did not know was that the true spirit continent was full of martial arts, and there were a lot of things that were hard to understand. Compared to that, what he said was already very easy to understand. At least for Yuan Shuamei, Yi-chan was already a powerful person in her heart. I can't take advantage of you for nothing. This is a sword manual. I found it by accident. Although it's very ordinary and doesn't have much value, it can be used as a guide for sword artists. Yuan Shuamei took out a thin book from her storage ring and handed it to Yi-chan. Yi-chan took it and took a look. On the cover of the book, there were 2 ancient characters, sword manual. Alright, I'll go back and try to understand it. Yuan Shuamei immediately said goodbye. She was afraid that if she stayed here for too long, that trace of understanding would disappear. Watching Yuan Shuamei's back as she left, Yi-chan put away the sword manual and went back to the Green Willow House. Deep inside the main building of the Emerald Martial Palace, next to a crescent-shaped lake. The courtyard here was different from other places. It was tall, large, and magnificent. It was built with precious stones and covered a large area. Sister Ji, don't you want to come in and have a seat? Outside the courtyard, a male disciple with a noble aura asked Ji Shuyan to stay. Ji Shuyan shook her head and said, no, brother, sure, I'll go first. After saying that, she turned around and left. The male disciple, who was called Brother Sure, had a bad look on his face. He punched a huge hole in the thick wall of the courtyard without using any zhanqi. Brother Sure, I'm Cui Shiming. At this moment, footsteps came from behind. The male disciple with a noble aura turned around, frowned and said, what are you doing here? It was Cui Shiming, who was 17 or 18 years old, and was quite handsome. He was the one who had lost to Yi-chan before. He forced a smile. He was a bit scared of the man in front of him. This man was not an ordinary core disciple. He was one of the top 4 core disciples of the Emerald Martial Palace, the Stone Man Sherpatian. He was as powerful as the extreme Palm Lu Wuxiang, and was only second to the young Master Emerald, who had already stepped into the clasping Yuan realm. Brother Sure, are you interested in Ji Shuyan? Cui Shiming smiled and asked. Sure Potion's face darkened. Don't get involved in things that you shouldn't get involved in. Otherwise, don't blame me for being cruel. Cui Shiming hurriedly said, Brother Sure, you misunderstood me. Why would I get involved in your business? I wouldn't dare to do that. Then what do you mean? Brother Sure, do you know about Yi Chan? I do. Isn't he the famous Sky Cloud Martial School disciple, who has comprehended the half-step sword intent? What does he have to do with him? Cui Shiming said in a low voice, Brother Sure, you still don't know about it, do you? The one who was engaged to Ji Shuyan is Yi Chan. It's him. Sure Patian indeed knew that Ji Shuyan was engaged to Yi Chan, but it was cancelled later. However, he didn't know who it was. Indeed, Yi Chan is the one who was engaged to Ji Shuyan. Back then, he was still a useless cultivator, and was not even noticed by Ji Shuyan. But now, that useless cultivator has become a genius who has comprehended the half-step sword intent. It's hard to say that Ji Shuyan won't be interested in him. Chapter 123. Hearing him, Sure Patian recalled that 2 hours ago, Ji Shuyan's expression had obviously changed. She must have seen that disciple from the Sky Cloud Martial School named Yi Chan. Thinking about the fact that these two used to be engaged, Sure Patian could not help but feel jealous and angry. The woman he loved would never be allowed to have any relationship with anyone else, even if that relationship was no longer there. He would still be very unhappy. This Yi Chan, he needed to teach him a lesson. Looking at Cui Shiming, Sure Patian asked, Do you have a grudge against Yi Chan? Cui Shiming's face showed a ferocious expression. This guy is evil and cunning. He defeated me and made me lose face in front of my junior sister Yi Xian. He had liked Yi Xian for a long time. Their relationship was quite good before, but ever since he had been beaten by Yi Chan, she would only greet him coldly whenever she saw him, which was a huge blow to his self-esteem. He wished he could go back in time and kill Yi Chan until there was nothing left of him. Sure Patian sneered. Obviously, Yi Xian wasn't telling the truth, but he didn't want to expose him. You can leave now, Sure Patian said. Cui Shiming was confused. Brother Sure, are we just going to let him go like this? Let him go? Dream on. Tomorrow, during the celebration banquet, the disciples of the major sects will compare notes with each other. At that time, I will challenge him and make him lose face in front of everyone. It would be best if I can make him lose his mind. In this way, I can justifiably cripple him. If it was possible, Sure Patian wanted to kill Yi Chan right now. With his power, he could still do it. The so-called half-step sword intent was not even worth mentioning in front of absolute power. Cui Shiming was startled by Sure Potion's tone. He thought about all the people who had gone against him in the past, who were either killed or crippled, unable to continue their cultivation for the rest of their lives. Cui Shiming could not help but feel happy. Yi Chan, if you want to blame someone, blame yourself for being too famous and making me lose face in front of Sister Yi Xian. Once you become a cripple, I will treat you well. After Cui Shiming left, Sure Patian murmured to himself, Junior Sister Ji, I will let you know that a loser will always be a loser. Even if you have comprehended the half-step sword intent, you are still a loser in front of me. Humph! The night came and the stars shone brightly. Every big and small lake in the Emerald Martial Palace was reflecting a bright moon. Beside the bright moon were many lotus clouds, high up in the sky. In the middle of Green Willow House, Yi Chan turned on the crystal light in the room, and was reading the sword scripture. The sword scripture was not a secret book. It talked about the ancient swordsman's understanding of sword principles. Some of the theories were very shallow, and some were very profound. Just a word or two was enough to make people ponder endlessly. Some didn't talk about sword arts but about mentality. What mentality could make people enter the best state, and what mentality could make people have a chance to break through the shackles of sword arts. There were even some descriptions of sword will, but it was very mysterious. Good book. Yi Chan couldn't help but praise. Although this sword scripture couldn't directly improve one's fighting ability and sword art, it could help a swordsman gain a lot of theoretical knowledge. Theoretical knowledge should never be underestimated. For a martial artist, he might be able to become a powerful warrior without any theoretical knowledge, but he would never be able to become a great master. A great master would need to have a huge knowledge base. Only in this way he would be able to learn from hundreds of different schools of thought and create his own path and theory. As he immersed himself in the contents of the sword scripture, Yi-chan gradually forgot about the time. Outside the yard, the moonlight was like water, and the stars were shining brightly. Suddenly, a strong gust of wind blew over from afar, stirring up a part of the lake. The head elder and the others who were resting were all confused. Just now they had sensed that there was a sharp chi flashing past, but when they tried to sense it carefully, they couldn't find anything. It was like it was just an illusion. Su Jing, who was meditating, opened her eyes. She subconsciously thought of Yi-chan, then closed her eyes and ignored him. There were only 13 pages in the sword scripture. Although Yi-chan had read it very carefully, he still finished it in less than half an hour. After waking up from his meditation, Yi-chan felt that his mind had become much clearer. Holding the hilt of the hidden cloud sword in his hand, Yi-chan could feel it even more clearly. He felt like something obscure was about to burst out from the bottom of his heart, which was extremely mysterious. It was the sword intent. After thinking for a while, Yi-chan found that his half-step sword intent had become even more solid. At his level, he had already reached a bottleneck, and breaking through it was not something that could be done in a day or two. He had to spend a long time to polish the sharpness of his sword intent. On the contrary, even if there was only a slight improvement, he would be able to clearly sense it. If it was the half-step sword intent before, then now it was a step further from the half-step sword intent. There was only a thin layer of thin gauze between the half-step sword intent and the real sword intent. As long as there was a slight breeze, the gauze would be lifted, and the essence of the sword intent would emerge in his heart. Letting out a long breath, Yi-chan murmured to himself, "I did not expect that a normal sword spell could be so useful. It saved me a lot of time to train, and with just a little bit of comprehension, I will be able to master the sword intent in no time. I really have to thank you for this, Yuan Shuemei." At this moment, if Yuan Shuemei knew that Yi-chan had gained a lot from the sword scripture, she would definitely be stunned. She had been studying this sword scripture for a long time, but she couldn't find anything special about it. At most, it had made her fighting style more practical. Standing up, Yi-chan opened the window and looked at the moonlight for a while. After a while, when he had calmed down, Yi-chan closed the window and started his daily Zhanqi training. Nothing happened that night. The next morning, the lake was shrouded in a thin layer of mist, which looked pure and holy. The quiet Emerald Martial Palace gradually became lively, filled with people's voices. Some of the leaders of the big forces who couldn't make it to the Sky Cloud Martial School yesterday had also arrived. The scene was 10 times more spectacular than the inner disciple ranking competition of the Sky Cloud Martial School. After all, young Master Emerald had stepped into the clasping Yuan realm, which was not something a small inner disciple ranking competition could compare with. If everything went well in the next 10 years, young Master Emerald would definitely become the pillar of the Emerald Martial Palace, and his fame would definitely not be any less than the leaders of the top 5 martial institutions. During the celebration banquet, the most outstanding disciples from the top martial institutions will definitely compete with each other. At that time, we will be able to watch the top geniuses of the Windy Nation fight. Unfortunately, those top disciples won't come, otherwise it would be a grand occasion. It's already very good. People like North Snow Fastblade Lynch and Stoneman Sherpatian are basically as powerful as young Master North Snow and young Master Duanmu. Only young Master Emerald, who has stepped into the clasping Yuan realm, is more powerful than the others. That's right, it's really scary. In the Emerald Martial Palace, it's already quite good to have one genius at the child level. In addition to young Master Emerald, the absolute Palm Lu Wuxiang and the Stoneman Sherpatian are both at this level. Plus the traceless Snow Jishuan who has recently emerged. There are 3 of them in total. Yeah, the Emerald Martial Palace has never been short of top geniuses. Although Lu Wuxiang and Sherpatian are listed in the second group of young generation in the Windy Nation, everyone knows that they are definitely the top of the second group. They are almost as powerful as young Master Duanmu and young Master North Snow. On the road between the lakes, some people who had just arrived were discussing with each other.